I think my lifestyle gave me a lot of insight and perspective and intuition that maybe somebody else wouldn't have because it was from such a young age. So it was a story worth telling for me because this is a story where you don't just survive, you thrive.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. One of the things that we've spoken about, because Mike and I have experienced this firsthand, when criminals retire or, they get out of prison and they reform, and retired police, there is a common bond there. People don't think that there's a capability where we could be friendly with each other or even friends. But most good cops that I know, they could have gone the other way so easily. They just chose that path, and then half of their friends chose the other path. That's how it was. That's how I grew up. Like some of my friends were criminals. I went the other direction. There's a lot of common traits between a real criminal and a cop. Type A personalities, likes adventure, likes the adrenaline, likes a certain lifestyle. So there's a lot of commonalities. So we're working on you changing that mindset where you don't like cops.
You're right, though, but you're lacking the money.
Well,
right?
Right. New Jersey. No, New Jersey, that's changed. That's changed.
Well, nobody gets into law enforcement to be a millionaire, though.
Just like teaching. Yeah. But and you brought something up interesting. So most people in the rackets do not retire wealthy. Let's be clear about that.
No, you end up in jail or dead.
It's the dons that end up with money, or they don't because the lawyers will run through it. It's because you like the life. Yeah. It's a life. And I left that life just like that. Do I remember that life? Did I like it? Yeah. What was not to like? And
getting catered to and protected.
And that's something you just brought up. I was protected. And
because you had a loving father who happened to be a gangster.
That's exactly how yes. So why can't you be a good husband and a loving father and a coach and a good man in the community and be in the mafia? Why can't you do both?
Because Goodfellas says it doesn't happen. I'm dead serious. Goodfellas says it doesn't happen. However, you have a movie like The Godfather, where Don Corleone and his wife, there's no chicanery going on. There's no Gumat on the side. There's no but. It's him and his wife. That's and she. So when I read this book, that's what came to my mind. She protected him. She knew what he was.
My mother was his Gumat. Let's be clear about that.
In the beginning. But I'm talking afterwards.
Yes, but she also at some point realized, right, this was more than that. So that's why she stuck out the 14 years.
Now
But just getting back to your father real quick. I'm sure he was well respected in town because I'm sure he. Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
Well, everybody got tipped.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And like in Rutherford back in the day, around 2, 3 in the morning, woke me up every time we had garbage night. Somebody came around and took our garbage cans out to the sidewalk. So everybody got tipped.
And I'm sure the politicians were very nice to the family.
Yes.
Exactly.
He went to all the Rutherford Labor Day festivals,
The true gangsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And So,
exactly.
But he was not pretentious. He was very humble. He, I could remember my father telling me, I may wear clothes like this, and so does mommy, and you do too. But you only wear one pair of shoes at a time, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
So I wasn't raised with excess.
Now, your father had a very unique opportunity to actually leave and somewhat retire?
Yeah.
But there was a reason why, and there's a major event that a major movie was made out of, which sort of told him, okay, it might be time to head out.
Oh, yes. So I guess I was like 16 years old, and we had just gotten back from Mexico, Acapulco, my mom, myself, and my cousin. And my father had started talking about, I guess around that time, that's how I remember, things are getting tight, not crazy about who's coming up. The bosses are getting lax. Things were changing, right? So he kept talking about it. And then I remember my mother saying, what are you talking about? And he said, Lefty, I got to go over for these sit downs with him because he's gambling 120 G's and there's a sit down and he pays it, starts again. He says, but he's with this guy, Donnie. And he said, he's got a mustache. It's like the Yankees. You can't have any facial hair. So he had a mustache.
Like the Yankee.
Yeah.
The Yankee.
Also criminals.
Yankee.
Also criminals.
They steal your Christmas presents.
They've stolen so many World Series trophies.
So he just did not like this guy. And my father was not involved in going to Florida. He was asked many times to go to Hallandale, to go to Miami, where all the Southern contingency was.
To see Santo Trafficante.
Yes, and Sonny Black, Napolitano, who, when Mike Sabella got demoted after Carmine Galante got gunned down, they demoted Mike Sabella from Cabo to, I guess, back to soldier, and Sonny took the crew. And, my father he would go to Brooklyn a lot and Staten Island. He did not like this guy. And he said, I got to start pulling out. Let's be clear. You don't get a pension. You don't get anything. And sometimes you don't get to retire. But my father was from an era where, as Tommy DeVito told me when I spoke with him, he didn't belong to any one person or any one group. He worked for anybody he wanted. He started a long time ago. He proved himself, and he was smart, and he made money. So he really was from an old school rule book.
But he's also a unicorn in the Mafia as modern way thinks, because he's able to navigate in and out of different families.
All five?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was mostly with the Genovese, the Bonanos, So, but anyway, so things were getting tight. He start going over less and less. Now, when you would go to Mulberry Street, the social clubs, also the Motion Lounge, and there were social clubs in Brooklyn and Harlem and Staten Island. But when you would go to Mulberry Street, I remember my father saying to my mother, what the hell are they doing? They're walking up and down that block talking. He's like, this guy. He's like, they got to go down the side streets. They got to all be tapped, the payphones. So, and sure enough, it came out in the book they were.
Mm-hmm. There's pictures of those guys walking up and down that Mulberry Street.
Yeah, I walked with them sometimes. I remember, Joe Pistone. And my father didn't buy that he was a jewel thief. He just didn't buy that whole story.
That's intuition.
So
exactly.
He started pulling away, and by 81, he was out. And that's Lefty got picked up in 81, I believe, in August. Sonny Black, got killed.
Which Sonny Black actually got it the worst because he got his hands cut off because he brought somebody in that was impure. And they found him a year later in the river in a bag. Yeah.
Well, Lefty brought him in, but it was Sonny's responsibility. See, when you head a crew, it falls on you.
Anthony Mira also got killed.
Anthony Mira got killed, too. And I think Sonny was only 53. But he knew. And Lefty did not go to jail, like they said. But he did die not too long after. I think he had some form of cancer.
He had... and
maybe emphysema.
He had cancer.
Smoker.
He had cancer, but I think it was... they say it in the movie. I can't even say. He had genital cancer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what it was. And he got out I think he died in 96, but he was only out for like 6 months.
You don't have to worry about genital cancer.
No, I do not.
And it is true about these guys. Somebody asked me this, so I'm just going to say it. These guys, I don't know if it was in a movie, I don't know, but somebody said to me, what's with the draft? I said, oh, my father was the same way. I said, because he smoked Lucky Strikes, but not a whole pack, maybe 5 a day.
Oh, with the window not being down.
And my father always had that window cracked. And my mother going to the city on a Saturday night, what the hell are you doing? I'm ruining my French twist, So, and he said, well, I don't want the draft. I'm just keeping it open for a few minutes before we get to the tunnel. I've got to put the windows up. And I remember Lefty, they didn't want the draft. That goes back to Italy. If you go to Italy now, and it's a hot day and you sit in a restaurant under, if that's the air condition, they will tell you, you have to ask to sit there. They will not seat you there because you could get pleurisy, you could get bronchitis.
Really?
Yeah. So that goes back. So all those guys, I don't know who the hell asked me, a friend. I said, oh, it was all true. All true. So they could open the doors and the smoke would pour out because they would not open a window.
So you have this wonderful book, which you were so kind to let me read, Welcome to the Family, which is not the original title, but it's the original title was actually kind of cool. And you get into it in there. It's called They're at the Chinese Restaurant, which is right under here. And that was the term for when they were locked up.
Yeah.
But, this is a really interesting book. It's a page turner because we've touched on some of the stories here, but there's so many more in here that are riveting. Why write a book about your father, this invisible man who obviously wanted to be invisible?
To stay invisible.
To stay invisible. Why write a book about him and all these exploits? He was a successful gangster, which isn't newsworthy.
And he was a soldier if he was slotted, because he really wasn't slotted, but if you had to slot him, so he was not high up, he reported to captain. But why did I write it? Interesting reason, I think. And I'm going to say first, my father is looking down saying, Angela, you're with cops. Come on. So, are you kidding me?
Hush bet.
So tell me where the money's buried.
So this is how I wrote the book. I woke up one day and I said, I think I'm going to sit down and write a book. And I told my husband, and he says, nobody does that. I said, well, I do that. And I sat down and I hand wrote and I just start writing. And I thought about why I felt I needed to write this book. And I needed to write it for two reasons. I think it's a story that's worth telling. I think that it's a story of not only, I don't even want to say surviving for me, from my father. This is how he survived the Depression, 7 children, a mother that died when he was 15.
It really
This was
humanizes.
his way of surviving, for right or wrong. He made his choices and he lived with them. For me, it's worth telling because I worked with children for 22 years as a teacher. And one day, Sean Brown says to me, I didn't do my report, Mrs. Pisano. And I, big chunky kid, one of those jolly guys, 6th grade. I said, why? He goes, my dad. He said, he's a bookmaker at Barnes and Nobles, and he's up all night making the books, the bindings. Now I'm innocent, sixth grade. They're usually not this innocent. And Sean probably knew, but he didn't want to
Elaborate.
So I said, okay, do it when you can. Of course, his father was a bookmaker, but he was not making books. And I have a feeling that things did not go right that morning in his household.
So you would have been there, done that moment.
So I'm not saying it made me a better teacher. What I'm saying is I think my lifestyle gave me a lot of insight and perspective and intuition that maybe somebody else wouldn't have, because it was from such a young age. So it was a story worth telling for me, because this is a story where you don't just survive, you thrive. You thrive. I had a legal mom. I had an illegal dad. I went to college. I worked in high school a little bit because I had to beg my father. He didn't want me to work. I wanted to work just a little bit. I left a life. I was told, education, education, education. Stay away from this life. My father used to say it all the time. This is not a clean life. This is a disgusting life. And I'm not saying that my life is wonderful, but I left it behind. I taught school. I live in a nice suburban town, raised 2 children with Joe. And
Joe's a guy we got to get in here. What's it like marrying a mobster's daughter?
I made him ask my father to go to Fort Lauderdale with him, and we were going to sleep in separate hotel rooms, and he didn't know he was a retired mafioso. Then I told him in Florida.
Oh,
See, and that's a question I was going to ask you before. What was dating like in your teens? Because nobody wanted to come around you.
So dating for me, I think, was, First of all, the guys didn't know why my father wore the uniform of a sport coat, dress pants, and a nice shirt sitting on the couch watching boxing. And my father was a man of basically no words. So he, he would say hi, but he was cordial, but no words. So I think guys were a little leery.
They should be.
And my one of my high school boyfriends, I guess he was a senior, I was a sophomore or something, and he was leaving out of the side door. My father, always about 10 o'clock at night, would make demi-tasse and his feuilletels before he'd go to work. It's his favorite pastry. And so my boyfriend kissed me, and he only kissed me on the cheek real quick. And my father walked in at that point, and I think he was going to hit the floor. I thought, and my father just looked at him and he said, "You kissing your sweetheart goodnight? See ya." It was like, okay, see ya. And he liked them, but I think they were a little leery. And I think,
but I think we need to bring Joe in here, Mike.
Yeah,
I really do think we need to bring Angela's husband in.
Yeah,
so when we got off
let's
the
not tell
plane,
Angelo though.
Yeah.
when we got off the plane though, and came home, and we were engaged with no ring or anything. But then I told him in Florida, so he had no clue, that he was selling this story. And of course, my father was so smart. He's like, "You think it's okay for you to go? You go." And
Give him enough rope to hang himself.
that's what my father used to say. If a person wants rope and he needs a little more, just keep giving it to him. So, yeah.
So before we, when's the book coming out? Let's start there. When's the book coming out?
I think probably January.
January.
Yeah. That's the projected date.
And it's going to be everywhere, of course. And this, from reading this, it's not going to end in text, in my opinion. It's going to go further than text.
You think so?
I do, because what this does is it humanizes a life that they've demonized a lot.
By no means, though, are these men. But
they
humanized him.
Yes.
But by no means is this a life you want to aspire to.
No. It does not glamorize the life in any way. All it does is talk about it's like a father-daughter story with a backdrop in the world of the mob. And it's fascinating. And when you told me about it, I'm like, you said, "Do you want to read it?" Of course I want to read it. This is wonderful. So I'm looking forward to this coming out. Now, there are other women in your shoes that you were in, where their fathers are not nice people. Doesn't have to be the Italian Mafia, in all different walks of life. So if you were to talk to somebody like little Angela, who was running around the house, who didn't really know any well, knowing what you know now, what advice do you think you would give them?
So the advice I would give to children. So we didn't talk about this, but I used to get knots in my stomach. I couldn't eat, and our doctor would say Coke syrup. There was always Coke syrup. The medicine, you got at the pharmacy for my stomach. And there was anxiety. And I was at attorney's house, his attorney's house, going over indictments and the grand jury and the trial, right? So a kid worries about that, because I lived with the anxiety of, I'm doing well here, right? I have a nice life. It's joyful, all of that. But in a second, it could change. And my advice to little children today is the same thing that I got from Bobby Gelnella, who was our doctor and friend after my father's first cousin. I was like 16 or 17 sitting in his office on Newark Avenue, and he said, "Angela," I was still having stomach issues, Coke syrup, knots in my stomach. And he said, "Your parents are smart. They will always protect you. They will, keep you shielded. Let them do the worry." So the only advice I could give kids is don't worry. Don't worry about this. You be a kid. You play. Go out for that football. Go out for the cheerleading, the lacrosse. Go play music. Get on the bike. And let your parents really stay in the adult world. And that's the only advice. The other thing is that for children, if this is your normal and it's a safe place, then that's your normal. Don't let anybody tell you ever that's not your normal.
Normal's a dual-edged sword.
Yes,
'Cause
this was my normal.
What's normal to you might not be normal to me, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, Angelo, listen, we're coming to the end of this. I know it goes fast. It goes fast, and I wish we had time to tell more, because I know there's a lot more in here.
Andrew charges us too much for the studio, so we
Yeah.
can't stay too long now.
So, I know what on the surface it looks like you lived a pretty charmed life, a protected life, but there was some times in there of doubt, some times of anxiety, which you've shared with us. Living this just life of a movie, what do you think it's taught you?
Nondescript is good.
Well put.
For me, peace is good. Enjoying my coffee on the porch, not seeing a sedan across the street with two men sitting in it.
Yeah, I would say.
So inner peace. I saw my mom and dad, attorneys and court cases and money, and my father's name was never on anything. All these things that you don't think about that I assume all three of us do legally, right? If you want to buy something, you buy it. Doesn't matter, check, whatever. My father never had a check, never, So how does that actually happen? It happens through, I'm going to use my father's word, maneuvering. And my father was a big gambler. So he didn't go to a Shylock. He wouldn't go to the street for money. He would go to a loan company. He would pay the guy off at Suburban on Center Street and Franklin Avenue in Nutley at the time.
It's very little consequences, 'cause especially he didn't own anything. If he defaults on the loan, who cares?
And just, give him his loans. But so what did I learn? I learned that honestly in life, wherever you find your peace, that's the life you have to lead. Peace. Because that's probably the most important thing. And some people don't find peace for a long time. My father found his peace at 71 years old.
When he got out of the life, when he was already out of the life.
Yeah, he enjoyed for the first time getting up and making coffee, going out on his acre, tending to his tomato plants, with his terriers, going to the track. He had peace. My father had ulcers. My father used to say, "This is a monkey on my back. This is something you deal with every day." Mm-hmm.
I think your father was a duck on a pond. I've said this to you before, where you've told me some of his ailments when he was in that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. He appeared calm on the surface, but if you look underneath the water, those little legs are flapping a mile a minute.
Oh yeah, he had GI issues, ulcers. Yeah, you're living with no protection from anyone.
Well, Angela, I can't thank you enough to come in here and talk to two cops who I know you're not fond of, and tell
You
this.
think your father had ulcers then? Imagine what he's like now.
He's saying you're a traitor.
He's good. Manon. The book is Welcome to the Family, My Life as a Mob Daughter. It is a wonderful book. I can't wait for this to be published, and you just got to promise me one thing. When it does get published, I would like a signed copy so we can keep it here in the studio. And
we'd like you back in the studio to promote the book.
That's another thing.
Oh, sure. I'll come back. Thank you for having me. This was
So now
fun
that
to
you
do.
vetted us and you met us and everything else, it's okay. You'll come back to
I had you all
promote the book.
checked out.
Well, we would trade, I would read a little bit and I'd call her and we would trade critiques and stuff like this. I'm nobody, but, it's nice to have another set of eyes.
I do have to say, though, when I left my house, there was a sedan across the street with these two guys sitting in it.
Yeah, but that was because of Andrew. That wasn't his. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. It was fun.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast. The suffering of a mafia daughter. Yeah, mafia daughter, right? Okay. The suffering of a mafia daughter with Angela Pisano. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned today. Danger comes in many forms. Love hits when it wants to. In all business, you have to work your way up. Certain professions don't have a retirement plan. But most importantly, a father's love is a father's love.
And that's true.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget you can join our subscription channel on YouTube. Follow us on all social media. That's LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Go to popple.com for a digital business card. Put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount. Follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And, of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.